London is one of the most famous cities of humanity. Home to around 9 million people, or 0.1% of human beings, it started out its life as a Roman settlement on the north banks of the River Thames around the year 50 by the Thames' junction with the now extinct River Walbrook. And whilst the city is now of course unrecognizable to its first days 2,000 years ago, one of the most impressive and fascinating remains from its early days can still be found hidden in the heart of the city, somewhere you might not expect. Right below this much modern-looking building by the street named after the former river, this is the Bloomberg SPACE, the European headquarters of Bloomberg. This intricate building also contains one of the thousands or so exits of the city's busiest tube station, and right beside it is exactly what we're here for. Welcome to the London Mithraeum. This is a museum that exhibits the Roman temple found in London after the Second World War, dedicated to the god Mithras of Persian origin, called a Mithraeum. That refers to cave-like Mithraic temples of the religion of Mithraism, followed by a secret all-male cult worshipping the pagan deity Mithras at its core during Britain's Roman days about 2 millennia ago. If you are one of the rare viewers who went to 2 of my primary schools relevant here, you may recognize this name as one of the 5 houses of our schools. Coincidentally, the one I was in. They all stood for the sun in different languages. But returning back down to our own planet, the museum starts off with a temporary art commission that changes half-yearly, such as this Born from Stone by Goshka Mashiger and Not Decimal 1% by Jonathan Baldock, and are rather lovely. And right next to this is a permanent part of the exhibition, displaying a variety of objects from the Roman era that have been carefully excavated, helpfully guided to us by informative tablets, highlighting the stories behind each one of the artifacts. But after the historic warm-up, the real adventure begins once you take the stairs downstairs, which in itself is an experience, as they mark the average elevation of London across the years as we descend further down into mystery, highlighting how much we've elevated London by constantly building over the centuries. But once you reach down to the level London stood after the departure of the Romans over 1600 years ago, your phone is already out of cellular reach even all these centuries later as you arrive onto the mezzanine level with this rather elegant waiting area with lots to inform you about what to expect out of the temple you're about to visit, such as a good deal of background context inscribed on the walls, electronic displays if you want to delve further, and even a fantastic presentation with soothing audio narration and visual effects in the background to give you a few highlights about the temple as you visit. Quite kindly complemented, oh that was tricky, by transcripts of the narration for those who might be able to hear less. And speaking of accessibility, it is also fantastic that they have illustrated the London's elevation history evolution diagram on the lift as well for those unable to use the stairs. A nice touch, though once you descend even further down is where the actual action begins, and I mean literally. This is the London Mithraeum. Built back in the Roman Empire era around 240 AD, it was excavated around this site back in 1954 whilst the site was being cleared off its ruins from the bomb attacks of the Second World War, and has been described as London's greatest Roman discovery of the 20th century. Indeed, it is a great two-listed building by historic England. But for most of its modern history, the temple's ruins were relocated about 100 meters from its discovery site for an open-air display along Queen Victoria Street, about here. And it stood there for over half a century when Bloomberg acquired the site to base a European headquarters at. And luckily, they undertook the responsibility to preserve this marvelous of a discovery in much better light, and has rather remarkably, very intricately brick by brick, brought the temple back to its original level 7 meters below today. Just 12 meters to the west of its exact location, as they discovered parts of the eastern foundations of the temple, still in situ but too fragile for display. Nonetheless, what you get to experience here is nothing short of unique, as you're first greeted with a trailer of how the temple operated, complete with theatrical mist and sound effects like you saw in the intro, just like it would have been over 1600 years ago. In fact, let's hear some of it. Now, I don't know about you, but that certainly reminded me of the sounds you tend to hear at temples around the world, which in itself is not surprising as the religion is believed to have been founded in Persia, modern-day Iran, and has similarities to the world's second oldest religion of Zoroastrianism, which in itself has similarities with the world's oldest religion of Hinduism next door in India, and of course the subsequent evolutions of Jainism and Buddhism in the subcontinent, hinting its possible connections to 4 of the world's 5 oldest religions. But hopping back to London in the meantime, here are some of the features of the temple you can have a look around here. To begin with, you arrive at the entrance of the temple at the same point where the floating platform now stands, allowing you to have a panorama of the temple heads on, where you immediately notice the nave of the temple, which was the lowest part of the temple that was likely made out of timber. And this is guarded on either side by side aisles where the worshippers likely sat or reclined in timber benches on the highest side so as to observe the rituals taking place in the nave. A posture we 21st century Londoners are still well accustomed to, in it. Meanwhile, in between them is where you can make out the basis of what would have formed a pair of 7 columns on each side, which may have symbolized the cult's 7 initiation grades. And the haze dust sprayed across the temple today does a good job of helping us visualize how they would have looked like. In contrast, something that was found only to one side of the aisles was, well, a well, as water may have been used for rituals. And on the complete opposite end of the well was the point where some buried sculptures were discovered beneath the floor near the entrance door posts adjacent to the narthex here. But the dig holes had been covered over during the reconstruction of the ruin, resulting in nothing left to see here. But what you will absolutely see is perhaps the most important part of this temple, and that's the raised dais. Straight ahead from the entrance, that was a platform where a statue of the god Mithras laying a bull would have been placed, as this was the symbol of the religion. The holes at the surface of the plinth or altar, right by the rounded apse and buttresses, would have been where torches would have been placed. Again, resonating with Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Zoroastrian temples of India today. It is rather splendid how they've let us experience a Roman temple here by giving us a 360-degree view of the site, together with a floating platform at the original entrance, as well as seating at the back behind the impression of Mithras. Oh, speaking of him, it was thanks to a sculpture of his face, luckily by chance found at the last day of its excavation back in 1954, that we were able to confirm that these Roman ruins were indeed of a temple dedicated to the god Mithras, and the rest is history. The sculptor's marble head now lies somewhere in the collections of the Museum of London, the London Mithraeum, once it hopefully reopens next year. Luckily, I managed to visit and click a couple of pictures just in time before it shut in December 2022, cause I planned for the long term, and would have looked like this resin model that's displayed in the waiting level of the museum, part of the fully fact-filled infotainment displays that also includes a detailed overview of the temple and its parts where I got my facts from. Hey, credit where credit's due. And also the Tauroctony. This was essentially a relief or medallion that acted as the central icon of the cult as its focal point, and would have stood in a recess right below a larger sculpted scene, likely of plaster of Mithras slaying a bull, perhaps ironically symbolizing the creation of life by nourishment through blood, surrounded by various other symbols, inscriptions, carvings, and also a zodiac around Mithras. The one that stood here was discovered quite a while ago, back in 1889, and their importance is highlighted by the fact that Tauroctonies have been found in Mithraea all across the former Roman Empire, alongside the United Kingdom, in parts of Spain, Germany, Austria, Italy, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Romania, Greece, and even outside the continent over in Syria. Such was the extent of the Roman Empire. But before the Romans finally departed Britain back to mainland Europe by the year 410, the temple was remodeled and rededicated to the Greek god Bacchus until the late 4th century, before the temple fell into the hands of Mother Nature, buried under several meters of development for over a millennia and a half, only to finally see the sky after the Second World War. Alongside the temple itself, around 14,000 artifacts were discovered at the site, about 600 of whom have been put on display at the ground floor of the museum for you to see today. They include this door fragment, one of only a handful to have been found in Roman Britain, a wooden paddle, as this was built on the banks of the river Walbrook, bells made of copper alloy and iron for various uses such as wind chimes, plaques such as this lead bull given how important bulls are to this temple, though this was used more for astrology, some 700 coins, as you expect of any archaeological site, because money is everything even back in the day, and over 400 writing tablets like this, complete with a stylus dating from 57 AD, even a few years before the newborn city was destroyed by Queen Boudica, but also one with the oldest recorded mention of the name London, to be revealed in my next video. But for now, you can use the 21st century version of tablets to learn all about the beautiful artifacts preserved here. Neatly complemented by a good selection of postcards, leaflets, and booklets you can freely take home as you exit. And be sure to ask for family activity pamphlets as you visit, whether you are a small or a big kid like me. That's quite fun, innit? All in all, it is a fantastic little museum/temple tucked away along Walbrook that's completely priceless in both its interpretations, and is 100% recommended to visit if you love history, or even if you just happen to be a human being, you know? Who could have guessed back in the Roman days that some 1600 years later, the temple will be restored exactly as it were, like a hidden time capsule in the heart of London, along the banks of the now extinct river Walbrook, which itself has a memorial dedicated to it that also opened as part of the Bloomberg redevelopment, through this fantastic installation named Forgotten Streams by Christina Iglesias. That's also worth a stop when visiting here, right opposite Cannon Street Station by the Bloomberg SPACE. And if you're curious about the state of this long-lost river that the temple sat next to, all that remains of it here in 2025 is this covered mouth of the river, visible at low tide at the point where it met the River Thames between Cannon Street Railway and Southwark Bridges today, though that really would deserve its own video someday. But for the time being, many thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed watching this, then checking out my YouTube channel's page would be romantic.